I know what you're carrying right now. I don't know your name. I don't know where you're sitting as you listen to these words. Whether it's a kitchen table at 5 in the morning with a cup of coffee that's already gone cold, or a bedroom where the silence is louder than any sound you've heard all day. But I know what you're carrying. Not all of it, not the specific shape of it, but I know the weight. I know the way it sits on your chest when you wake up, before your eyes are even open, before your mind has had a chance to catch up with what your soul already knows. You've been carrying something for a long time now. Maybe so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to not carry it. It has become part of you, the way a stone becomes part of a riverbed, worn smooth, settled in, as if it always belonged there. But it doesn't belong there. And somewhere deep inside, beneath all the layers of I'm fine and I'll manage and it is what it is, you know that. You've prayed about it, haven't you? I'm not talking about the kind of prayer that's really just thinking out loud. I'm talking about the prayers that come from the place beneath words. The ones that rise up in the middle of the night when there's no one to perform for, no one to be strong for. The prayers that are more like breathing than speaking. You've whispered things to God in the dark that you would never say in the daylight. You've asked questions you'd be embarrassed to admit you asked. And maybe, some of those prayers feel like they hit the ceiling and came back down, like letters that were never opened. I know that feeling, and I know something else about you too. Something you might not have told anyone. Not your spouse, not your closest friend, not even yourself in the honest moments. You're tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind of tired that settles into your bones after years of being the one who holds everything together. Years of being the parent who stays calm, the spouse who forgives first, the friend who listens, the one who shows up, the one who carries the load because someone has to. And it might as well be you, because you learned a long time ago that the world doesn't stop spinning just because you need a moment to breathe. But you're here now, and that's not an accident. Something brought you to this video, something deeper than an algorithm, deeper than a recommendation, deeper than chance. There's an old passage, words written thousands of years ago by someone who knew this exact kind of tired. Someone who was running from a burden that felt like it would crush him. He wrote, "Cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you." You've probably heard those words before. Maybe you've read them on a greeting card, or heard them in a sermon, or seen them stitched onto a pillow. But I want you to hear them differently today. Not as a platitude, not as a nice sentiment, as something alive. Something that has been moving toward you for a long time. Through every sleepless night, every silent prayer, every moment you thought you were alone with that weight. I'm going to tell you something now, and I want you to let it land before you move past it. That burden you're carrying, the one that feels so specific to your life, so intimately yours, so impossible for anyone else to truly understand. It has a name, and once you hear its name, something begins to shift. Not dramatically, not like lightning, more like the first crack of light at the edge of a sky that's been dark for a very long time. But I'm not going to tell you that name yet. Not because I'm holding it back to be cruel, but because you're not ready to hear it yet. You will be. By the time we reach the end of this journey together, you'll be more than ready. You'll wonder how you ever lived without knowing. But right now, in this first moment, I need you to simply do one thing. I need you to stay. Stay with me. Stay with these words. Because what I'm about to share with you, layer by layer, breath by breath, is something that was known by the ancients, written in sacred texts, buried under centuries of religious language and ritual, and yet is as real and as close to you right now as your own heartbeat. There is a reason your prayers feel unanswered, and it's not what you think. Let me tell you about a tree I once saw. It was an old oak, the kind that has been standing so long the land grew up around it. Its trunk was thick, scarred, split in places where lightning had struck, and the wood had healed over in rough knotted bark. Half its branches were dead. The other half still carried leaves, but they were sparse, like the tree was rationing what little strength it had left. Anyone walking past would have looked at it and thought, "That tree is dying. It's just a matter of time." But if you had knelt down, if you had gotten close to the ground where the roots disappear into the earth, you would have seen something else entirely. Beneath the surface, those roots were alive. Not just alive, growing, reaching deeper, spreading wider, searching for water that the surface had forgotten. The tree wasn't dying. It was going underground. It was doing what ancient things do when the season turns against them. It was investing everything in what couldn't be seen. That's what you've been doing, whether you know it or not. You see, there's a passage in the Psalms, Psalm 55, where David writes words that feel like they were dictated by your own heart. He says, "My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me." Read that slowly. That's not the language of a man who has it together. That's not the voice of a king on a throne. That's a man in the dark. A man who is carrying something so heavy that his own body is rebelling against the weight of it. And then he says something that most people skip right past. He says, "And I say, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. I would fly away and be at rest." Have you ever felt that? Not the desire to die. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that ache to simply disappear for a while. To stop being the person everyone needs. To stop being the one who remembers, who organizes, who forgives, who holds the family together at holidays, who calls the doctor, who checks on everyone else, who makes sure the bills are paid, who carries the grief of the ones who are gone and the worry for the ones who are still here. You've wanted to fly away, to be somewhere, anywhere, where no one needs anything from you, where you could just breathe without feeling like every breath belongs to someone else. David felt that. A man after God's own heart felt that. The greatest king Israel ever knew sat in the dark and wished he could turn into a bird and fly until the world got small enough to forget. And here is what I need you to understand. What I planted as a seed at the end of our first moment together, that feeling, that exhaustion, that desire to fly away, it is not weakness. It is not a failure of faith. It is not evidence that God has abandoned you. It is something else entirely. Something I'm going to show you, piece by piece, as we go deeper. But first, I need you to consider something. Think about the heaviest burden you're carrying right now. The one that came to mind the moment I started talking. I want you to notice something about it. I want you to notice where you feel it in your body. Is it in your chest, your shoulders, your jaw, where you clench at night without knowing? That weight has a location. It has a shape. It has almost become a companion. One you didn't choose, but one you've learned to live with. The way you learn to live with a bad knee or a drafty window in the bedroom. You've accommodated it. You've built your life around it. But here's what David knew, and what I'm beginning to share with you now. The burden isn't the problem. The burden never was. David carried burdens that would have crushed most people. He was hunted by a king who wanted him dead. He lost a child. He was betrayed by his own son. And yet, in the same psalm where he talks about fear and trembling, he writes 6 words that change everything. 6 words that we'll come back to again and again, because they hold the key to everything I'm going to reveal to you. Cast your burden on the Lord. Not carry it better, not manage it more efficiently, not push through. Cast it, like you're throwing a stone into deep water, like you're letting go of a rope that your hands have been burning to hold. But here's the question. David doesn't answer in that moment. The question I'm leaving open for you right now. How? How do you cast something that has become part of you? How do you let go of something you've been holding so long your fingers don't remember how to open? How do you give God a burden that has fused to your bones? David gives us a clue buried deeper in the Psalms. A single verse in Psalm 62 that almost nobody reads carefully. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence. Silence. Not more words, not louder prayers, not more effort. Silence. Waiting. The two things your soul is most afraid of. Because in the silence, you can hear the wait. In the waiting, you can feel it. And feeling it is the last thing you want to do. But what if feeling it is exactly the doorway? There's something waiting on the other side of that silence. Something David discovered in his darkest hour. Something that has been known by every soul who has ever been brave enough to stop running and finally stand still. But we're not there yet. We're not ready yet. Because before we can find what's on the other side of the silence, we need to understand what or who has been hiding in it. I want you to try something right now. Just for a moment, I want you to stop listening to my words and instead listen to what's underneath them. Listen to the silence between the sentences. Listen to the room you're in, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of a clock, the distant sound of traffic or wind or a neighbor's television. Listen to your own breathing. Did you hear it? That resistance, that little flinch inside you when I asked you to be still, that part of you that wanted to reach for the phone, or check the time, or think about what's next on your list today. That's not a character flaw. That's not distraction. That's something deeper. And it's been with you for a very long time. Here's what I've come to understand about people like you. And when I say people like you, I mean people who have lived long enough to know pain intimately, who have buried parents or friends, who have watched marriages shift shape, who have stood at bedsides and gravesides and kitchen sinks at midnight, wondering how they became the person everyone leans on. People like you have developed an extraordinary skill. You can be in a room full of people and never actually arrive. You can sit in church and plan the week's meals. You can bow your head in prayer and think about the test results you're waiting for. You have learned to live on the surface of your own life because the depths are too much. Because in the depths, there's grief. There's the face of someone you miss so much it physically hurts. There's the question you're afraid God might answer differently than you hope. And so you stay busy. You stay useful. You stay in motion. And you tell yourself it's fine. But David, the same David who wrote Psalm 55, who wanted to fly away, David knew this trick. He knew the human tendency to run from the silence. And he wrote something in Psalm 62 that cuts right through it. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence. Read it again. Not wait in activity. Not wait in productivity. Not wait in doing more, trying harder, praying longer, serving more. Wait in silence. Silence is the one place your soul fears most, because silence is where the burden speaks, where the uncried tears finally fall, where the name of what you're carrying, that name I mentioned earlier, the one I said I'd reveal when you were ready, begins to take shape in the dark, the way a figure becomes visible when your eyes adjust. I told you the burden has a name. I'm going to give you part of it now. Not all of it. Not yet. But the first syllable, the burden you're carrying, is not your past. It's not your circumstances. It's not even the loss, though the loss is real and sacred and deserves to be grieved. The burden is something you do to yourself every single day without knowing it. It's a practice, a habit of the soul so deeply ingrained that you can't see it any more than a fish can see the water it swims in. And it has to do with control, with the belief, buried so deep you've never said it out loud, that if you stop carrying everything, everything will fall apart. That if you put the burden down, someone will get hurt. That if you stop holding the world together, God won't hold it for you. There it is. Do you feel it? That tightness in your chest when I say it? That's the nerve. That's the place where the wound actually is. Not in the burden itself, but in the belief that you were meant to carry it alone. That it's yours. That letting go means failing the people you love. That surrender means defeat. David knew this nerve. He touched it in himself. And in Psalm 55, after the anguish, after the fear and trembling, after the wish to fly away, he writes something that sounds like a command from a general to a trembling soldier. Cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. Notice the word, sustain. Not solve, not fix, not erase, sustain. Like the roots of that old oak tree, reaching deep into soil that no storm can reach. God doesn't promise to remove the burden. He promises to hold you while you carry it. But here's the thing. You have to cast it first. You have to let go of the rope. You have to open the hands that have been clenched for so long. The fingers have frozen in place. And that act of opening is the most terrifying thing a person like you can do, because you've built your entire identity around holding on. But something is about to shift. Something is already shifting, even now as you listen. Because awareness, true awareness, the kind that comes not from being told, but from being seen, has a power that no amount of effort can replicate. You didn't come to this moment by accident. And what's coming next? What I'm about to show you about what happens when the hands finally open. It's something the ancients knew, something David lived, something that has been waiting for you since the first night you whispered into the dark and thought no one was listening. But before we get there, there's something I need you to see about who you've been and why, despite everything, you've never actually been alone with that weight. Not for a single moment. There's a moment in the life of every old river where it narrows, not because the water is running out. There's plenty of water upstream, more than enough, but the banks close in. Rocks rise up on either side, and the river that was once wide and lazy, spreading across the valley in gentle curves, suddenly becomes something else. It becomes tight, fast, pressured. The same amount of water is being forced through a smaller and smaller space, and the surface that was once calm becomes rough, churning, violent. If you stood on the bank and watched, you'd think the river was in trouble. You'd think something had gone wrong, but the river isn't in trouble. The river is about to break through, because what's happening, that narrowing, that pressure, that turbulence, is not the end of the river. It's the moment before the river opens up again on the other side, wider and more powerful than before. The constriction is not a punishment. It's a passage, and the river doesn't fight it. It doesn't try to widen the banks with its hands, because rivers don't have hands. It doesn't resist the rocks. It doesn't blame itself for being narrow. It simply moves through. It trusts that the openness is on the other side, even when it can't see it yet. You are in the narrows right now. I know you are. The pressure you've been feeling, that sense of everything closing in, of having less room, less air, less margin for error, that's not the end of your story. That's the passage. And the reason it feels so intense is not because something is going wrong, but because something is trying to get through. Something that can only reach you on the other side of this constriction. Something you've been praying for without knowing its name. David knew the narrows. He lived in them for years, literally, in caves, running for his life, anointed as king, but hiding in the rocks like an animal. And it was there, in the narrowest, darkest, most pressurized place of his life, that he wrote Psalm 62. The psalm that begins with words so quiet they almost disappear. For God alone my soul waits in silence. From Him comes my salvation. Read that first word again. For, not to, not with. For. David is talking to his own soul. He's not talking to God in this moment. He's talking to himself. He's standing at the edge of his own fear, looking at the churning water of his own life, and he's speaking to the most frightened part of himself. For God alone, O my soul. It's as if he grabs his own soul by the shoulders and says, stop. Stop striving, stop calculating. Stop trying to engineer your own rescue. Wait. In silence, he's there. I need you to feel the weight of what David is doing, because it's what I'm doing with you right now. He's not preaching. He's not performing. He's sitting with his own soul the way you sit with a frightened child in the middle of the night, not telling them there's nothing to be afraid of, because there is, but telling them they're not alone in the dark, that the dark has an end. That morning always comes, even when the night feels eternal. And then David says something that I want you to hear, as if it were written for you and no one else. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be greatly shaken, not greatly shaken, not immune to shaking, not spared from the tremors. David is honest enough to admit that the ground will move, that the foundations will vibrate, that there will be nights when the walls feel thin and the wind comes through and you wonder if anything will hold, but not greatly shaken, not uprooted, not destroyed, because the roots, those underground, invisible, stubborn roots, are anchored in something deeper than the storm. Here's what I need you to start feeling, even if you can't fully articulate it yet. The burden you've been carrying, the one that has your name on it, the one that feels like it was custom made for your specific life, is not random. It is not punishment. It is not evidence of a God who has looked away. It is the narrows. It is the passage. And the reason it feels so heavy is not because you're weak, but because you've been trying to carry through the narrows what was never meant to be carried. It was meant to be cast. Cast your burden on the Lord. But here's the part nobody tells you about casting. Casting isn't a single dramatic gesture. It's not one prayer, one altar call, one moment of tearful surrender that fixes everything forever. Casting is a practice, a daily, sometimes hourly, choice to reopen hands that want to close, to unclench a jaw that wants to tighten, to look at the burden and say, out loud, if you have to, this is not mine to carry alone. I was never meant to hold this by myself. And when you do that, even once, even badly, even with trembling hands, something happens that you can't see from the surface. Deep in the soil of your soul, where no storm reaches, the roots shift. They find new ground. They reach for water you didn't know was there, and the tree that looked like it was dying begins, slowly, imperceptibly, to send life back up through the trunk, into the branches that everyone else had given up on. Something is being prepared for you, right now, in this moment. Something that has been moving toward you since the first night you cried into your pillow and thought no one heard. I've been building toward it, layer by layer, and we're almost there. But there's one more thing you need to understand before we arrive. Something about the silence you've been avoiding. The silence David kept returning to. The silence where God has been waiting this entire time. Not in the noise, not in the answers you've been demanding. In the silence. What if the silence wasn't empty? What if it was the loudest thing you've ever heard? And that's the question, isn't it? What if the silence you've been avoiding, the silence that scares you, the silence you fill with noise and activity and worry, what if that silence has been the answer all along? Not an empty silence, not the silence of absence, but a silence so full it could burst. The silence of a God who has been sitting beside you in the dark, waiting for you to stop talking long enough to hear him breathing. If you're here with me at this point, still listening, still leaning in, you're exactly the kind of person I wanted to reach with these words. You're someone who doesn't just want comfort. You want truth. You want the real thing. And I want to ask you something. Subscribe to this channel, not because I need a number, but because I want you in this community every single day. I want you waking up to these words each morning the way you wake up to coffee. Come walk with us. There are others like you here. People who have lived enough to know that the easy answers were never enough. People who are brave enough to sit in the silence and wait for God to speak. You belong with them. Subscribe now, and let's take this journey together, one day at a time. You know, there's something that happens to us as we get older. The things we used to think were so important, the noise, the achievements, the opinions of people whose names we can barely remember now, they fade, and what's left is simpler, quieter, more real. You start to recognize certain truths, not because someone told you, but because you lived them. Faith is like that. It becomes more precious after it's been tested, after it's been through the narrows, after it's been pressed and refined and left in the dark long enough to discover whether it was real all along. And maybe that's where you are right now. Not at the end of your faith, at the refining of it, at the place where the silence stops being your enemy and becomes the ground where God meets you. David knew this place. He stood in it. He breathed in it. And what he found there, what I'm about to show you, is not just an answer. It's a transformation. The kind that doesn't change your circumstances. It changes you, everything we've built. Every image, every verse, every question I've planted in your heart. It all converges now. The name of the burden. The meaning of the silence, the secret the ancient roots have been carrying beneath the surface. It's all here, waiting in what comes next. And what comes next will change the way you pray forever. The name of the burden. You've been waiting for it. So here it is. The burden you've been carrying. The one that keeps you awake. The one that sits on your chest before dawn. The one that has fused to your bones so completely you forgot it was there. Its name is alone. Not loneliness, not being by yourself. Alone. The belief, buried so deep you never said it out loud, that you are carrying this life on your own shoulders, that the weight is yours, that the prayers hit the ceiling, that the silence was empty, that God was absent, that you were the only one holding everything together, and if you stopped, it would all collapse. That is the name, alone, and it is a lie. It has always been a lie. Every single night you whispered into the dark and thought no one heard, he heard. Every morning you woke up carrying what you carried. He was already awake, already holding what you couldn't. The silence you feared was never empty. It was the silence of a God who doesn't shout over your pain. He sits in it with you, the way David discovered in the caves, the way the oak tree's roots find water in the dark, underground, where no one sees, the way the river doesn't fight the narrows, because the openness is already there on the other side, waiting. David knew. He wrote it all, the anguish, the fear, the trembling, the wish to fly away. And then he arrived at the place where every thread converges. Psalm 62, the fullness of it, the river reaching the sea. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. On God rests my salvation and my glory. My mighty rock, my refuge is God. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. Pour out your heart, not your polished words, not your Sunday prayers. Your heart, the raw, unfiltered, trembling thing you've been protecting from everyone, including him. Pour it out. Cast it. Open the hands. The roots are already deep enough. The ground will hold. You will hold. Not because you're strong enough, but because you were never the one holding yourself up to begin with. You are not alone. You were never alone. Not in the narrows, not in the dark, not in the silence, not for a single breath of a single night. The burden was never yours to carry. It was always an invitation to set it down. An old oak tree doesn't survive the winter by fighting the wind. It survives by going deeper. And when spring comes, when it always comes, the leaves return, not because the tree earned them, because the roots never stopped reaching for water that was there all along, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be found by something that was willing to go underground. Your roots have been reaching this whole time, even when you couldn't see it, even when the branches looked dead, even when the world walked past and thought, that tree is dying. It wasn't dying. It was being sustained. If these words found you today, if something inside you shifted even quietly, even if all that moved was a single stone in the riverbed of your heart, then do two things for me. Subscribe to this channel and share this video with 5 people you know who are carrying something too heavy. You know who they are. The ones who say they're fine, the ones who hold everything together. Send this to them and leave a comment, not a polite one, a real one. Tell me what you felt, tell me what came up, and tell me what you want to hear next, because I want to walk with you through whatever comes after this. The silence isn't empty. It never was. Listen again.